there's three stages, even though I'm not sure how they fit chronologically. But the first two, definitely. The beginning of forensic architecture is, in a way, doing human rights activism based on traces rather than testimonies. That's the very beginning. Then after that, you reincorporate, in one way, testimonies by making testimonies part of not something that you report on, but something that is part of the construction of the evidence, and hence, as you just explained, the closer contact with the people that actually took these open source videos. But then there's a third technique that you developed, which you call situated testimonies, which is another way of dealing with testimonies, and this time the traces that you look at are not traces on the ground or traces on the ground mediated by cameras, but in this case you explore the memory themselves. So if you can talk a little bit about this situation.
Absolutely. So firstly, I just want to kind of like return, because you mentioned that, and I think, I don't know if the viewers know that this debate existed within human rights between the humanists and the scientists, you know, and we wanted to refuse that. And it wasn't only about what we know, it's about also who gets to tell a story. And, you know, the humanists were saying, well, if you do remote sensing human rights, you silence the survivors or the victims. And those that were doing the science was saying, well, you know, how is that building up to a complete picture? And for us, it was really about opening the conversation, meaning listening to the testimonies of matter, if you like, in looking at material trace, looking at videographic trace, at recorded trace, and at human voice, together, amplifying it and building a kind of a, you know, human non-human, you know, assemblage that kind of, you know, create and build those things together. And everything that we were doing was about amplifying evidence. And before I'll go into the situated testimony, I'd say that whereas in court, what is the best kind of evidence is a simple evidence. The less composed it is, the better it is. That single image, photograph, or a video of a perpetrator and a victim in the frame, and the act is all contained within the frame, is best because it's simple. But for us, evidence becomes stronger the more threads are building into the fabric. This is what reinforces. One evidence reinforces the other. Of course, when you present complex evidentiary assemblages in legal context, they all cry foul. No, they say, no, here's the manipulation is coming, and you're only artists and architects, and I don't know what you do. You kind of trick us on the card trick. It's a card trick, no? And so that is the issue. And the same goes to testimony. So testimony should also not be contaminated, and memory should not be contaminated as a principle of law and also of human rights. And if you take, this is why the more times you take the same testimony from a person, it's, you know, the further away from supposedly the authentic memory it comes, and you start remembering your own testimony, and etc. For us, language is only one and pretty reduced way of penetrating the totality of experience that people had, which includes sound, it includes space, and it includes not only space, the ambient of that space. And particularly this is important when witnesses to extreme acts of violence are traumatized. And traumatized might be a kind of a clinical definition that has thresholds, but almost everybody that you speak to who has experienced violence is affected by it, and the effect also goes to memory itself. And the closer you get, people can tell you very precisely what happened before and what happened after, but the heart of the testimony and that sometimes what is important to narrate is actually erased by, you know, kind of trauma's effect on memory. And one of the ways of engaging that is through, with us, through a very systematic, very slow and careful, and also together with well-being expert or family members of the person that is doing the recollection, a very slow process of model building of the space, in which we don't ask anything immediately about what has happened, and everything about tiles, the temperature, the height of the ceiling, the amount of light, the handles, you know, things that are very material, and build them very, very slowly. And we've realized that very often memories spring with the most unexpected of digital objects that are being put into place. And in this book, no, I narrate the encounter with a woman that survived the drone strike. She prefers to remain anonymous. She actually forgot what has happened, but she wanted to deliver testimony, and she was willing to undergo that process. And only when we modeled a certain fan that in her house in Mir Ali on a frontier between Pakistan and Afghanistan was targeted by drones, only when modeling the fan was she able to recall that she has seen human flesh on it after the drone missile hit the house. And coming to terms with that and having that model in place allowed the entire, around that fan, the entire event and space could be reconstructed. Same with survivors of the Grenfell tragedy in London, who we were working on a civil suit, and we reconstructed.
Can you tell us very briefly what it
2017, 72 people in the center of London, in full view of everybody in London, burned to death in a housing block. After it was cladded for aesthetic reason with flammable materials. Despite the company that put this flammable material knowing that these are flammable material. Somebody thought it looks good. And effectively it caught fire, and 22 floors. There were hundreds of people in the building. In order to survive, you needed to go through the stairwell, and the stairwell was full of smoke. And that was London hell. And I remember the day after, I mean, we just couldn't believe it. I mean, everybody was, you were seeing that smoked building with a cloud going into high heaven in front of all of us, shocked that something like that could happen and could be a result of the kind of relaxation of planning codes and an amplification of aesthetic codes in one of the most richest boroughs in the world, Kensington and Chelsea. But there was a bigger civil suit, and as part of it, we were asked to record the testimonies of people. The flats are gone, but we were building the flats one after the other, you know, object by object, book by book, plant by plant, and trying to understand also, so that was important in itself, but all those objects were also memory anchors. It was like, you know, the art of memory in the sort of digital age, if you like.
And the most extraordinary example of that is what you did in the Syrian prison of Sandaia, that you also reconstructed based on the memories of the prisoners who managed to escape. This prison that has been recently uncovered in full with the fall of the Assad regime.
Yeah, absolutely. There we met 5 survivors who were in Turkey as refugees who wanted to record their experience. They haven't seen the building because they were thrown into a car blindfolded. They were blindfolded or had to press their hands against their eyes. When they were inside, they only heard the building. And they counted, sometimes some of them counted footsteps, and some of them paid attention to the echo and reverberation, and together with Lawrence Abu Hamdan, former PhD student who now runs an organization called Earshot. We reconstructed from their audio recollection the architecture of the building, which was, and produced the only model of that building, because here you have no photographs. And sometimes the situated testimony comes to replace the absence of photographs. But just like photograph, memory is also perspectival. No? I mean, it belongs to the person, but situated in a particular space-time. And for a long time, that was the reference, because this was the only model of Sednaya, of the way it was organized inside. And incredibly, when it was liberated this fall, initially what happened was hundreds of people from Syria were tagging us, writing us, direct messaging us on Instagram or X, to say, you know the building better than anyone else. They're still, our loved one are still in the basement somewhere. Where's the basement? Where's the basement? And when we were saying, actually we don't know, because the witnesses that we were interviewed were not at any basement in there, or at least they did not record that. There was anger that was actually, and we decided just to put all our material on open, actually the files, the architectural files, because we had the platform, we had a kind of like a polished version of that online, but we put a digital model online, and that digital model is a reproduction of a huge prison with tens of thousands of prisoners in it, like the real kind of current day concentration / death camp in Syria. That was out, and it was proven that the witnesses remembered correctly, because it was almost precisely what was discovered when the place was stormed and liberated. There was no, I never felt joy like at that moment, actually, when this was there, and also for our witnesses, that I can talk at a different time about our interaction with them later, but like the validation of their recollection, and how precise recollection that were, from fragments of evidence could have been. But yes, you're right that here you have also, is architecture in situated testimony, the model that you walk through, is this an evidence, or is that is a testimony? It is a piece of evidence that enabled testimony. Testimony and evidence are again entangled, and we're doing similar work now with descendants of descendants of descendants of genocide survivors in today's Namibia. We'll get to that, but using that principle of situated testimony of inherited memories. And we're doing it in two different ways. It's not a single recollection, it's a communal reconstruction, and it's not direct recollection, it is recollection of recollection of recollection.